And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, I'm going to just recap all of the games that ended up happening yesterday. And there was 5 games, 5 NBA preseason games that ended up happening yesterday. So we're going to go over every single one of them. So we're going to start with New York, heck of a team. This was obviously Karl Anthony Towns' debut game, and it's well regarded. Well, not really well regarded, but the main highlight from Karl Anthony Towns in this matchup was hitting a ridiculously deep three-pointer, and that's really the reason why the Knicks ended up grabbing him. So, yay, it works, I guess you could say. But aside from that, the Knicks as a whole and as a team, they played rather well. McBride ended the game with 22 points, 8 for 18. And Landry Shamet ended up going 6 for 11 from the field, ended with 16 points. Precious Achiuwa, forgive me if I mess up that last name, ended with 15 points, 6 for 9 from the field. Jalen Brunson, 5 for 11, 12 points. And again, now Karl Anthony Towns, the only highlight of the game was that 1-3, and that was only one of his 2 shots that he ended up making that night. But aside from that, he ended the game with 10 points because of those free throws, and was also able to record 4 rebounds along with 2 steals. So, not to mention, there was also OG Anunoby, 4 points, Miles Bridges, 4 points, and Josh Hart went into the game with 0 points, good lord. But aside from that, this is just a preseason game, nothing really to worry about. And they ended up winning it. Now, the Charlotte Hornets, on the other hand, did LaMelo Ball, he made his return, and he ended the game with 18 points and was also able to record 7 assists, and he did all of this in just 19 minutes. And while shooting 6 for 14 from the field isn't really all that great, this is still a pretty solid performance coming from somebody who just returned from an injury. And Terrence Mann ended up playing really well as well. He shot 6 for 8 from the field with 15 points. Brandon Miller also ended the game with 12 points, but he shot 3 for 8 from the field, so not all that impressive. But still, this is, again, just a preseason game, and there were a lot of players that ended up coming off of the bench. The Hornets ended up shooting 44% from the three-pointer as a team and 50% from the field as a team as well. Meanwhile, the Knicks shot 35% from 3 and 42% from the field, yet they were still able to come out with a win. And honestly, this is just a better performance. This was just not really a better performance from the Knicks, but rather a luckier performance from the Knicks, I guess you could say, because again, didn't really have all that many players shooting all that well. So I am going to go ahead and acknowledge Anthony in the chat. Who are your surprising teams that were rebuilding last year that you can see making the plan or being a top 6 seed this year? None, honestly. I don't think that there's any sort of rebuilding team that can really surprise me for this year. I think all of the top-heavy teams are going to continue to be the top-heavy teams, and they're going to continue to hold the playoff spots. And I don't think that there's any room for any sort of rebuilding team to even make the playoffs in either conference. And he has more in the chat. With the NBA in-season tournament, do you think eventually the NBA might just completely take out preseason? No, they will not. I do not think that is going to happen, because this is a time where you're not supposed to play your starters. You're supposed to play everybody else. And this is also the opportunity where everybody else can actually get a job in their rotation and create a career for themselves. And I don't think the NBA is going to take that away. And because, in the tournament, you can make the argument that the coaches are still going to play their starters. In the preseason, there's really no argument for playing your starters. I mean, yeah, sure, LeBron was playing in the matchup against the Lakers and the Suns, but for one, that was only 16 minutes, and Anthony Davis was playing as well, but that was also only 18 minutes. Meanwhile, there were so many other players that were getting more minutes than LeBron and Anthony Davis. That was never going to happen in the in-season tournament or in even a regular season game. That's just not going to happen. So this is the time where they put the players that don't have a name for themselves against other players that don't have a name for themselves, and they see if they can make a name for themselves. So I don't think the NBA is going to give that up. I genuinely do not think that that's going to happen. But that's just me. And, I mean, considering how selfish the NBA might be, maybe they do it. But towards the end, I don't think so. At the end of the day, I don't really think that that's going to happen. Now, they might reduce the amount of preseason games. That might happen, but I don't think so. I genuinely don't think they're going to change that format. Now, Manzano also says the perfect example of this was Duncan Robinson from Miami. If it wasn't for preseason, I don't think we would have been able to find them. Yes, that is true, but then again, Miami also has a very, very prolific history of being able to find diamonds in the rough, I guess you could say. And, Duncan Robinson was just no different. And, similar to how they're able to do that, other teams should also be able to do that and should also be able to easily do that as well. And that's exactly what preseason does. But anyways, the Celtics, they ended up matching up against the Nuggets again yesterday. This time they played in the Boston Celtics home court. The Celtics ended up destroying them. 130-104 was the final score. And Tatum, Brown, Derek White, they all played 20-plus minutes. And Jaylen Brown ended up being the leading scorer for the starters in this game, 21 points. And Jason Tatum ended with 17, and Derek White ended with 13. This team is way too overpowered. And Sam Hauser ended the game with 6 for 7 from the field. Derek White was 5 for 10. Jaylen Brown was 8 for 16. Tatum was 6 for 14. And again, this team is just incredibly overpowered. Now, the Denver Nuggets, again, they didn't really play much of their starters. Don't really expect them to do that. And as a result, I don't really expect their bench to be better than the Celtics and their depth. I genuinely just don't. It's really unfortunate. But aside from that, the next game to talk about is the Raptors against the Wizards. Wizards ended up getting destroyed. The Raptors ended up scoring 125 points compared to the Wizards' 98. And Jordan Poole is still Jordan Poole, still an overrated shot chucker in my opinion, and really just not a big fan of Jordan Poole and how he plays, and a lot of his fans, honestly, now that I think about it. And there's also, the Raptors, as at least the starting core for the Raptors, did not play well at all. But it's really like the bench that was able to, because they had numerous players score 10 points or more, and if you're able to have a bench that can score 10 points every single time, you are going to be a really good team, consistently a really good team, and you cannot be mad at that at all. Now, the biggest surprise, however, is the Pistons beating the Bucks. I know it's the preseason, but Detroit beating the Bucks 120-87, and the Bucks only scoring 8 points in the fourth quarter is absolutely absurd. That is ridiculous. Jordan Ivey ended the game with 22 points, and it's not really like the Pistons were playing all that good. It's more so the Bucks were just awful, really. Obviously, it makes sense. No Giannis Antetokounmpo in the game. Of course, they're going to be awful. And Damian Lillard, he did go 5 for 10. Maybe he's back in that, maybe he's back in shape this time. But still, this is sort of a lackluster performance coming in from Milwaukee. And a very, very, very bad shooting night from a lot of people. A.J. Johnson ended up going 1 for 8. Andre Jackson Jr. ended up going 1 for 6. Ryan Rollins ended up going 1 for 4. AJ Green ended up going 1 for 5. Stanley Umude ended up going 1 for 4. And so many other, 4 other players ended up going a combined, let me just do some math real quick, a combined 0 for 12, which is just bad, genuinely just awful. Actually, 0 for 11, excuse me. It's really, really bad. You cannot win a game when you have all of these players playing so inefficiently. And the team as a whole shot 39% from 3, which doesn't really seem all that bad. However, 34% from the field as a team is really, really bad. Meanwhile, the Pistons were able to shoot 46% from the field, which is honestly the big difference maker in these two teams and the big stat So that's all that I really have on these preseason games and just a recap of all of these games. And that's all that I have for this show. So thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. If you really want your comment or question to get recognized, that's gsmcpodcast.net, or you could use you could go ahead and use Super Chat, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or is going to be guaranteed to get featured on the show, so it doesn't really matter which you use or which you do. It's like either or. It's very, very it really helps the show, and it'll make it much more interactive between myself and you guys. And that's all that I really have to say on this final segment. Now, there are preseason games that are happening today, and there's one actually happening right now. The Pelicans are going up against the Orlando Magic, and the score is 7-11 in favor of the Pelicans. So just updating you guys on, if you guys are interested in the preseason, and if you want to see the preseason, there's a game going on right now. And there's going to be several games going on at around the same time that NFL football is going on, so maybe I'll tune into them, maybe I won't, but that's all that I really have today on this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to